ESPN1420 and ESPN1420.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Great S.C.O.T.T Show, the Great Sports Callers Open Think Tank. As promised, joining me right now, he has done this for a very long time, decades in the business, breaking it down. You hear him on so many different stations, including Saturdays with James P. Bitterman on the Mr. Bitter Show right here on ESPN 1420. You can check out his stuff at MikeDetillier.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Detillier, and you can hear him right now with me. Mike, how are you today, man?
I'm doing just fine, thank you.
How did you guys make out with all the flooding? I know it's been a crazy couple of days here.
Well, we made out pretty good, Scott. God bless everybody there in Lafayette and that Acadiana area. I know they got it a lot worse than we did. I got 5.5 inches of rain Thursday morning, from 7 to 12, and probably an inch from 1 o'clock until Sunday night. I mean, we got it all in one shot, and knowing you kind of where this front was going to hunker down at, and so that was some touchy moments here, because when you get 5.5 inches of rain in a short period of time, you wonder, just how that's going to work out. But we made out here in the Bayou area very, very well. Fortunate.
Mike, I'm glad to hear it, man. And to everybody out there that's working right now and pulling up carpet, our best is with all of you guys. All right, Mike, let's dig into the Saints a little bit. And I want to start by asking you some questions on the offensive side of the football. Let's look at the line. Teron Armstead's a guy that I've talked to you about him quite a bit. We usually chat about maybe 2 or 3 times a year. I just think he's a special talent. Max Unger is solid. But to me, guard play is one of the bigger question marks, maybe the biggest question mark on the team. Can Andrus Peat make the switch? And that's the first part of the 2-part question. And the second part is, what is your biggest concern regarding the Saints O-line heading into 2016?
The guard play. I mean, there's no question about it. I think Zach Strief is solid at right tackle. A healthy Max Unger is one of the best in the business. And Teron Armstead is an elite left tackle. And, if you looked on this Saints team of who could get you the most back in return in a trade, it would be Armstead. He's that good. But I'm really concerned about you're starting Tim Lelito, who's a journeyman-type player in this league on one side, and Andrus Peat on the other. And Andrus, while he has gotten himself in better shape, he looks better than he did a year ago, he is still struggling in the pass protection part of the game. Where he's pretty good is as a run blocker, but he's really struggling in the pass protection part of the game. So it's a major concern for me. And if I'm playing New Orleans, I'm going after both those guards. They're going to have to prove it to me that they can block an elite talent if I've got one up front along that defensive tackle brigade. But Pete looks better than he did a year ago, but he couldn't look any worse. I mean, he was stiff as a board. He really didn't have good lateral movement skills, and he struggled when, they were doing like a little stunt. He had a lot of difficulties picking up which guy he had to block. We saw it again. Now, he was out of position. He was playing left tackle, but we saw it again Thursday night. They did a little stunt with him. He picked up the wrong guy, and he got beat. So I think what you've got here is a guy that he's the most watched offensive player because of where you picked him and such a big disappointment a year ago. And while I see a little better player, I still see a football player who's struggling, not only on the physical part of the game, because I think he's certainly got that, the mental part of the game. When you mess up on who you're supposed to block and who you're not, and who you're supposed to turn loose, that's a mental bust you have on there. And again, he has got some breakdowns in the pass protection game where a hard inside move, that guy's beat him pretty good.
Mike Detillier, our guest, long-term projection for Andrus Peat. Where do you see him in 3 years, Mike? Is he starting at right tackle then? Is he still on the team?
He's a right tackle. I think this is the last season of Zach Strief, and I think the plans are to move Pete over to the right tackle position. Now, during the summer, we met up at an airport, and we had some time to talk, and he brought up to me certain things about making that transition, and he's just a young puppy as a football player, just 22 years old. But I asked him what he felt was the most comfortable position for him, and he said left tackle. He said, I played it all my life, but he said, I'm getting used to the right side. So that's telling me that Zach Strief plays there one more year. They cut him loose, and Pete will be moved over to right tackle.
How difficult is it, do you think? I mean, I know you spoke to him, but in covering this league, this game, as long as you have, Mike, the tackle to guard transition, is it harder to do that than maybe transition from guard to tackle? I mean, how big is that curve? Is it small? Is it large?
I would think it's a small curve. All I know is Andrew Whitworth did it with the Bengals. He's bounced from tackle to guard, guard to tackle.
He's done it pretty well, too.
So,
yeah.
So I've looked at that. Brad Hopkins was another player that went tackle to guard and then guard back to tackle. So I've seen players do it. One of the things I've noticed, but this has nothing to do with Pete, is that when you select a lineman high in the draft, you got to be careful of where he went to school at. I think the thing that has digressed the most over the past 10 years for me has been interior play at center guard offensively. A lot of that having to do with the fact so much spread offense in college football. What they do from a technique standpoint has nothing to do with the NFL. Those guys struggle to get in this league. I just look at the guys that have made a fairly quick transition. Zach Martin comes out of Notre Dame, goes to the Cowboys, bang, right off the bat. Notre Dame ain't a spread option team. Andy Frederick comes from Wisconsin, starting center for the Cowboys. Wisconsin's not a spread team. Trey Turner, LSU, starts as a rookie and made the Pro Bowl last year. LSU. La'el Collins, same thing. Those teams aren't spread teams. Nothing close to that. Tyron Smith comes out of USC. That's a pro-style system. Now, Pete should have made the adjustment quicker. He went to Stanford.
Right.
But when you look at some of the other guys, Greg Robinson, who grew up right down the road from where I live, actually I went to high school with his dad. He went to Auburn. He's still struggling. This is his third year at the left tackle position. He told me totally different. He said everything was different from playing in the spread to playing left tackle in the NFL. He said, it had no connected dots. But that doesn't apply to Pete because he went to apply to him at all. But I do think, Scott, one of the things you've seen a major regression in is the interior play at center guard in the NFL. And a lot of that has to do with spread offense. Again, that's not why Pete is struggling. He seems to be a very top-heavy player that has trouble adjusting to quick movements up front. And when you see him, how you just kind of shocked just how big he is. Yeah. I mean, he is a huge, huge man. And I told him, he should be the first one off the team bus. Carl Nix was like that when he was on this team. Carl was like 6'4", but Carl was like 345 pounds. But, man, he was a big guy. And Andrus is 6'6", and, 300 pounds. But he has really struggled, and I think a lot of it has to do with his build and the fact that he is so top-heavy. He's got trouble adjusting to quick movements left and right.
Mike Detillier, our guest, looking at the Saints' second unofficial depth chart they released yesterday, and I use that word strongly. Tight end Coby Fleener is fourth. And I think everyone's expecting him to start week one, barring injury, when New Orleans hosts Oakland. But what do you think the cause of his we'll call it, depth chart demotion is?
Okay, Scott, you broke up. What player now? So
Coby Fleener is they have him in the latest unofficial depth chart at fourth. What do you think the cause of his? Well, we won't call it an actual demotion. We'll call it a depth chart demotion. But do you think it's because we're just speculating here, and maybe you know something I don't. But is it a playbook thing? Is it a practice thing? Why have him listed at fourth after last week with the first unofficial depth chart? As many would expect, he's listed first.
I think that's Sean being Sean. I think that's just Peyton, and he does some things. I don't know, to maybe get under a player's skin a little bit, but he likes to kind of play with guys. And I think this is his motivation a little bit with Kobe, that, hey, listen, we want you to pick this up at a little different pace. I know in talking to Drew Brees, he has full confidence in Kobe Fleener. He says, I know where he's at on the field all the time. But it's Sean's kind of motivation to do certain things for certain players. And I think maybe this is maybe to light a little flame. The other thing, too, is to get everybody thinking, why is he fourth? Why is he on the depth chart that way? I know one thing. Game one, barring an injury, Fleener's the starting tight end.
No doubt.
And he's going to be a 75-plus catch receiver, 8 touchdown-plus catch guy, because this offense is really built for the tight end. The other thing, too, is the next 2-3 games, I think you're going to see a lot of Josh Hill, of Hume, and Rashard Allen. I think you're going to see a lot of those guys. I think they don't want to show, too, what they want to do with Kobe Fleener. And I think what they're going to do is a lot what they did with Jimmy Graham, kind of in the same pattern. So I look at it, maybe it's a little bit of a prod, motivation-wise. The other thing, too, I think Sean wants to keep that Kobe Fleener card in his pocket for game one.
Mike Detillier breaking down the Fleener thing, and whether it's to motivate him or confuse fans, it's got folks talking. Running back, I think we all know Mark Ingram's the best of the crop, Mike, but you look at the depth chart, Tim Hightower, Murphy, Spiller, Cadet, and then you got Lasco, the rookie, who, is showing that he can do some stuff on special teams. What are the chances they keep 6? And if not, who do you think is in most danger of being cut?
I think the guys that have made this team today would be Mark Ingram, C.J. Spiller, Marcus Murphy, Daniel Lasco.
Okay.
I really think that final spot, the 5th spot, is going to come down between Cadet and Tim Hightower. It's going to come down to one of those two not being on the roster. Now, Sean wants to keep a fullback, so, Kuhn's going to be that guy. But I think he keeps 5 running backs. Well, for sure that Murphy and Lasco can help you on special teams. But I think because of what's happened in the past, and this team has been riddled with injuries at the running back position, I think he keeps 5 this year. And I think it comes down to Hightower and Cadet. It'll be one of those two that are not on the roster week 1.
Mike Detillier, our guest, you mentioned Kuhn. You feel like he's got the hold on the fullback spot. Maybe Homa, potentially an undrafted rookie, but this injury to Austin Johnson, you feel like it's kind of taken him out of the mix, and now it's Kuhn's job to lose?
It's Kuhn's job to lose. I mean, he knows what to do. I mean, he's a seasoned vet. He understands his job is as a lead blocker and, short yardage type guy. He's decent coming out the backfield as a receiver. So he's played in an offense in Green Bay that's very similar to what the Saints run. In a lot of ways, it's very, very similar. He made the comment, real smooth transition. Now, terminology is a little bit different, but he's basically telling you that, he's not splitting the atom here.
Right.
Everything is pretty close to being the same.
Gotcha. Mike Detillier. All right, lastly on offense, Mike, we haven't talked about the receivers, but let's just start with Michael Thomas. He is the quote, star of camp this year. When you evaluate his talent, who does he remind you of?
Alshon Jeffrey with the Chicago Bears. He's built that way. He almost identical, height, size-wise. I mean, very, very close. Their game is very similar in that they've got the length to make a big catch over the top, and they've got some scoot with them. They can plant that foot in the ground and take off. I said this to James, and I wrote a column back in May on this, or it might have been early June. I've never heard Drew Brees talk about an offensive rookie like he's talked about Michael Thomas. Now, you figure on this football team, he's had Reggie Bush, Mark Ingram, Jimmy Graham, Marcus Colston, Brandon Cooks. That's a pretty good group of guys. I've never heard him talk about a rookie like he did Thomas. And this was in the OTAs. This wasn't even headed into training camp. He went on and on and on about it, and one of the practices, and we saw the play, Drew checked down, and he gave a look to Michael Thomas, and that's where he went downfield. He said, after practice, we never practiced that before. He said, I gave him a look, and I wanted him to get into a spot, and he went exactly there, and he made the completion. They work a lot of time after practice on timing, and so Mike's made a real smooth, much better than anyone could have imagined, him make that transition from Ohio State to the Saints. I think all of us thought that there may be some struggle early on in the playbook because you can't compare what the Buckeyes were doing to what the Saints do. He picked it up real quickly. In interviewing him, he said, it took a little time for him, but he said, once he got it, and working certainly with Drew and McCown, he was able to kind of get the nuances of running this offense. He looks like a seasoned vet. But again, Alshon Jeffrey would be the comparison. I would be shocked, game one, that Michael Thomas and Brandon Cooks weren't the starters.
Brandon Cooks, do you see him taking an even bigger step this season, Mike, heading into year 3?
They don't have a true number one on this team because I think the number one status, it changes week to week. I think one week it may be Brandon, the next week it might be Willie Snead, the next week it might be Fleener, and Thomas is going to come into the mix. So he's a guy with great speed. He can push the envelope deep downfield. He's not the biggest guy, so, he's going to beat you with speed. He's not crazy about going over the middle. And, he hits the turf. He took a dive quicker than Sonny Liston did against Ali. Nobody's getting close to hitting him over the middle. He takes that dive fast.
Yep.
But, he is a really good, what I would say in this league would be a number 2 receiver. In the fact that his speed, his ability to get away from traffic, and his numbers will just get better. But when you look at the Saints, they really don't need a true number one because of the way the offense is built. The offense changes number one week to week to week.
Mike Detillier, our guest. All right, wrapping up the offense. You mentioned Snead earlier. Thomas, Cook, Snead. Brandon Coleman has been hot and cold. R.J. Harris, Tommy Lee Lewis have had good camps. In the Peyton Brees era, they've kept as many as 6 receivers. They've kept as few as 4 at times. Usually the 5th is a guy that's a special teamer. You know that those 3 guys are safe. Is Brandon Coleman safe? Should he be worried about the performances of a Harris and a Tommy Lee Lewis?
If I'm Brandon Coleman, I'm worried about the Saints picking up somebody else. He's 6'6", and he plays like he's 5'6".
Yeah.
He doesn't play like a king-size receiver. He's got games that he's looked good, and other games very inconsistent. Now, you can't blame that on youth anymore. He's had a couple years in the league. He's not a real sound route runner in using that big size leverage-wise to beat a cornerback downfield. The other part about it I hear people say, he's got bad hands. He doesn't have bad hands. You know what he's got? He's got the issue of wanting to run before he catches the ball. And I've seen this time after time after time with him. Right at the split second that he's going to catch the football, his eyes glance downfield, and he'll drop an easy catch. And so you got what you got here, a guy that I think will always be a potential guy. At times he may look good, and other times he's in the witness protection agency. So you know what you have in him. Tommy Lee Lewis has been the shocker. No one, even the Saints scouts, they didn't even have him on their radar. And it was Bill Parcells that went to Peyton and said, you got to sign him. He is all of 5'7". I know they list him at 170 or 175. Man, there's no way he's tipping that scale. I don't want to get on it if that's 175. I mean, he's in the 160s. He is rail thin, but you talk about a tough little guy. The two things that jump out, he's quick into and out of his cuts and his breaks. I mean, razor sharp, no wasted motion. Other thing, great eye-hand coordination. He has come down with some fantastic catches. And, you know, when you're that size and going over the middle, you're going to get hit if you catch it or you don't. So you best catch it. And, you know, he's been a guy that, you know, he made the comment in practice. We had a group of guys talking to him, and he said, you know what, the Saints cut me today. It don't cost them nothing. You know, I'm fighting for my football life every day. He said, that's the way I look at it. I'm fighting for my football life every day. Tommy Lee Lewis has made this football team. I think the guy in trouble is Brandon Coleman. I think if there's a receiver there, I think it's Coleman who might be sweating it out, that this team get frustrated with his inconsistent ways.
I would agree with you, Mike. I noted the same thing on Twitter watching the preseason game against the Patriots as I watched Harris, who doesn't nearly have the quickness of a Tommy Lee Lewis, but still make some plays, hang on to the ball, and then once he got on the run, protect that football with guys coming from behind. And I said, man, with the way these two guys are playing, Coleman should probably be worried. Speaking of worried, Mike Detillier, our guest, ESPN1420.com, worried about that defensive line with the news yesterday, Mike. I really like Sheldon Rankins, 3-technique player, can put the pressure on the QB from the inside. Bad news, broken fibula, had the surgery today. Typically, you're looking at being out 6 to 8 weeks, but you also have that curve of it's a rookie. And Mike, you know, you talk to players more often than I do. Anybody that's coming back from an injury will tell you it takes a couple of games to really get back into your rhythm. Two-part question. A, how significant was the injury yesterday to his development? And B, how significant is that to the Saints' defense and what they were planning on doing come week one against the Oakland Raiders?
Scott, it's significant because even before training camp hit, this football team lost their starting defensive end in Haloi Kakaha. They lost their third cornerback in Kyle Wilson. He was going to be the starter at the nickel position. So before you even hit camp, you got two guys. You lost a starter and a half starter because really Kyle plays in the nickel. I did the numbers on it. It's like almost 70% of the time. So you lost two already. Now you lose Rankins. And John Jenkins is still nursing an injury. So, you know, this football team, which is razor thin because of all the bad draft choices from 2010 to 2014, the 2 second-round picks taken away in the Bounty Gate issue, all that has all come, the chickens have come home to roost. Rankins really looked impressive. You know, one thing with Sean, you know, he's rare that he'll give a rookie praise. And so he's always kind of, you know, lighting the fire underneath Rankins one way or another. I thought game one, Tyler Davidson and Rankins would have been the two starters at the defensive tackle position and fairly coming off the bench. So it's significant, and he's going to miss at least a quarter of the season. And I agree with you, more than likely, we won't see him full strength until probably 6 games into the season. You know, injuries are not a maybe. It's when. The injuries always happen in the NFL. And it's just tough that you lost Rankins this early because of all the guys, he needed to work. The one thing I'm really impressed with Sheldon, and certainly you can see his quickness, his ability to get off the snap, and he's got good play diagnostic skills, really, really sharp there, is he's got the one trait that every really good defensive lineman has in the NFL. He can get off a block real well with his arms and his hands. If you can't use your arms and hands well, you Velcroed. And they got a lot of guys who are big, strong, fast. You know what? They can't get away from a blocker. They don't. It's almost like MMA boxing. You're just trying to get away from that potential blocker. Rankins is really good with that. For a rookie, he's got good hand usage as an interior player. So, yeah, it's significant on this football team. And I really thought, in fact, I wrote a column Sunday before the injury that the one thing that jumped out at me, just in the first game was the Saints were better up the middle with Tyler Davidson, with Rankins, Nick Fairley, and James Laurinaitis at middle linebacker. This football team gave up 4.9 yards of rush last year.
Jeez.
That was the most in the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
That's basically saying that every running back that went up against the Saints, he averaged 5 yards a pop. And where they're running that mostly is between the tackles. I thought they got better there, certainly. And so that's where the Rankins part really hurt your football team. So now, more than likely, Fairley will take his spot, then Jenkins will come in. David Onyemata is who he is. He's a young man learning how to play NFL football and learning how to play football. It's a big change for him, too. In the Canadian Football League, he had to line up 1 yard off the line of scrimmage. Now he's nosed up on a player. So everything's new to him. And I think where you're going to see the big jump with Onyemata is next year. Once he gets everything down, he's a real sharp kid. But 5 years ago, he didn't know if the ball was stuffed or plucked. He had never seen an NFL game, never seen a football game. When the coach threw him the ball, he was like, it looks like a rugby football. 4 years later, he's the best offensive defensive lineman in the Canadian college ranks. That tells me that he's sharp, he understands this game, but you can't expect that he's going to come in here and it's all going to come to him. It doesn't work that way. Playing line is not intuitive. As kids, we learned how to catch a ball, we learned how to throw it, we learned how to run with it. They didn't teach you how to get low, use your arms and your hands. You didn't know that until you were playing the line. And that's where Onyemata is at this point. But still, it's probably the deepest area the Saints have defensively at the defensive tackle position.
That's interesting, coming off of the news yesterday, but great breakdown. Mike Detillier, our guest. You mentioned Laurinaitis. Stephon Anthony's injured. They say he'll be back week 1. We mentioned getting your legs under you. Robertson, the new addition of him. What's your analysis of that position for this unit with Kakaha, outside linebacker / DN, depending on how Allen would use him. But when you look at the linebackers heading into this season as compared to last season, better, worse, even, what is your take?
It's better, one, because now you've got a guy inside that has played the position, and he's a football warrior. I mean, he has never missed a game in the NFL. And they needed a quarterback on defense. They didn't have it last year. So with Laurinaitis, they're better. I've become pretty good friends with Stephon Anthony, and we do a show together. So, he's explained to me about, he was a little bit overwhelmed, not so much in run defense, but in the pass coverage part of the game, because it was new to him. And he said, the tight ends and running backs will get on top of him so quickly. He said that wasn't that case in college. So it was new for him to pick it up, and they targeted him. I think he'll be, he'll be okay, and I would suspect that if he might miss game 1, but he'll be back early in the season. The key at linebacker is Donnell Ellerbe. Because of the fact this team is totally different with him on the field and without him. He's your best cover linebacker. He's got the best range of any of the outside linebackers. And, again, his ability to cover stands out. But he's constantly had injuries. He made a funny line. Somebody asked him, when's the last time you were healthy? And he said, probably in the 6th grade.
Yeah.
And so, that goes to show you, he's banged up a lot. He's had the hip injury. He's had foot problems. He's had knee problems. If he stays healthy, you're better at the line and the linebacker position. The other thing, too, is you have a real versatile guy in Craig Robertson. Craig's a guy that has started at all 3 positions, the weak, the Sam, the middle. And so if any of them go down, he's next man up. And he's a really good special teams player, but he's real sharp out on the field. And Nate Stuper, I think of all the guys, I think he's probably been the surprise player in that I don't think he's pressing for a starting position, but I thought he was strictly a special teams guy. And he's pretty good in the coverage part of the game. So I could see Dennis Allen putting him in an obvious pass coverage situation, and the guy kind of fighting for his life right now is Michael Marty.
ESPN1420.com. It's interesting, man, and to your point about Stuper, really showing some good coverage skills in that preseason game against New England, proving to me maybe more than a special teamer. Looking at the secondary, Mike, I'm just going to kind of lump it all together and throw it to you, but there's so many storylines here, whether or not Keenan Lewis can ever get back to a reasonable health that allows him to play the way he wants to. Jarris Byrd, are we going to finally see the guy the Saints hope to get? P.J. Williams, Von Bell, Roman Harper's presence. Two-part question, Mike. Your biggest concern about the secondary, and the second part is, what do you think the biggest plus is in the secondary heading into 2016?
My biggest concern is the health of Keenan Lewis. I think if Lewis is healthy, this is as good a secondary as the Saints have ever had in 50 years of football. It's if Lewis is healthy. Again, that's a big if. But my main concern would be Lewis because he's had 3 surgeries. Now, again, he's had some problems with the hip, and that to me is kind of scary right off the bat. So that means without Kyle Wilson on this team, he was injured before the season training camp started, P.J. Williams would be the starter opposite Delvin Breaux. And I think Delvin's the best cover cornerback the Saints have ever had. I'll debate anybody on that. I've had people tell me, Eric Allen and Mike McKenzie. He's a better player than Mike McKenzie. I can guarantee you that. And if he stays healthy, he's a Pro Bowl cover cornerback. So I feel good with Delvin. PJ's made a big strides this year, and you can see he's playing with a lot of confidence. He can plant and drive to the football really, really strong. So I like that part of his game. Behind them is a bunch of kids. Ken Crowley, Devontae Harris. They're the surprises because, you might have thought one could make the team. Scott, that's a pretty good chance both of them make the team. Crowley's a guy that was always intrigued me in college. He's a big cover cornerback, long arm, and at Colorado, when he got beat, he would grab and hold everybody. I mean, I don't know if they taught him that, but when you watched him, if he got beat, he was grabbing you. And so he got a ton of penalties. He was a target guy in a lot of different scenarios. You see him playing now much better technique than ever before. Devontae Harris, he's just not a big guy, but he's a good cover cornerback, very instinctive, technically real strong. Like Lewis, the question mark is Damian Swann, because Swann really played well last year when he was healthy. But, Scott, you've had a guy with 3 concussions in a short period of time. What happens if he gets a 4th one? I mean, that's going to maybe put his career on the line. And so this cornerback situation would look to be pretty strong is in question because of health issues involving Keenan Lewis and Damian Swann. Now, at the safety position, that is pretty let me go back to Cortland Finnegan. Cortland was brought in not to be the star. I think a lot of people have read into that. He's going to be the starter. He's going to be the nickel back. He's going to take Kyle Wilson's place in the nickel situation. He'll be the 3rd cornerback. He's a veteran, smart guy, great in run support, a tough little guy. And once he gets his hands on you, man, he beats you up pretty good.
He'll do a self-proclaimed dirtbag,
Mike. and he knows how to play this game, and he knows how to get away with things. But he's not a starting cornerback. He is the 3rd cornerback. And he takes Kyle's place. He brings in the experience, and he gets to kind of work with the young kids. The safety position is strong. Now, again, I got to see Jarris Byrd make it entire season. Kenny Vaccaro is much more comfortable in this system where he's up on the line of scrimmage. They don't have him, covering one-on-one downfield a lot. I don't know why Rob Ryan thought he could do that because he struggles in that area. But he's good in run support, sure open field tackler. Von Bell is a really good cover guy, really good. He matches up well in the coverage part of the game. I think he needs to get a little physically stronger to help him out in run support, but he's an impressive kid as a free safety. Roman Harper was the insurance policy. In case something happened to Vaccaro, You had nothing back there with experience. No one. And again, when you see what Roman does in this defense, he's way up on the line of scrimmage. He was good in the blitz situations under Greg Williams. I think you'll see a little bit of that with Dennis Allen. And then we've seen the emergence of Eric Harris, another CFL player. Scott, I've never seen a 6'3", 225-pound free safety with the Saints. Never.
No.
I mean, he's a big dude playing free safety and got good cover skills. Again, that transition with him from the CFL to the NFL, we'll see how quickly he can adapt. But he's a good special teams guy, very good in the coverage part of the game. It's almost in run support sometimes, and he played linebacker. He's waiting for the play to kind of break down a little bit. So I'd like to see him get a little bit quicker coming up the seam in run support, but he really excels in the pass cover part of the game. So I feel pretty good at the safety position. I think that you've got some depth at that position, and nobody in the league is full of veteran guys, but you've got young mixed with old. The problem with the secondary is health concerns and health issues involving Keenan, involving Swan.
No doubt. Mike Detillier, our guest. Last Saints question for you, Mike. Love your thoroughness, your breakdown. It's been great. Again, folks, head to MikeDetillier.com if you want to get a rundown of where he appears on various radio shows on a weekly basis, as well as his columns coming up this football season. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Detillier. When I chatted with you early in the offseason, Mike, you felt like that Brees deal was maybe a little, the extension a little closer, a little sooner to, getting done sooner rather than later. But then the Saints managed to move some money around. They got below the cap. They feel like they hold a little bit of leverage. What's your gut telling you? Is this thing done before September 11th when they host the Oakland Raiders, or are you heading into next offseason with a 37-year-old free agent who's still one of the best quarterbacks on the planet?
Listen, if I said I didn't feel as though you would sign, you know what would happen? They'd come to a deal tonight. Because all
say
spring,
it. I'm just messing.
all spring into the summer, I have felt that in talking to the different parties, that a chamber of a deal is in place. The big question mark is the guaranteed money. I think that's the tripwire at this point. My thing is the Saints have always been a horse that follows the other horse. They've never been the lead pony. They let Andrew Luck set the tone in the offseason, which is idiotic. But again, it goes to show there is some friction here between Tom Condon and the Saints front office. If anybody says different, they have no clue what they're talking about. It's the same people that said, Rob Ryan and Sean Payton get along well. Listen to Rob Ryan today and see how well they got along.
Not so much.
All I'm telling you is that there is some friction between Condon and Mickey over the last contract and into this one. I've always felt before the season started it was in the Saints' best interest to come up with a deal for Drew. It's going to cost you less today than it will in February of next year. I don't get what is the whole point here. All I know is, didn't you see a glimpse of what could potentially be your starting quarterback Thursday? You want Garrett Grayson to lead your team?
No.
That ain't happening.
No.
So I really believe that cooler heads will prevail into this. Now, last time what came into play, and I would bet a lot of money on this, Tom Benson, again, he has gotten up in age. Now you're talking about 4 years have passed. I think, a lot of his friends were saying, Tom, when you going to sign Drew Brees? Tom, when you going to sign Drew Brees? I think Benson got enough of it. I think, you know what? Get the deal done. Drew got exactly what he asked for in September of the year before. He got it in July of the following year. Exactly the same. So the great poker player, as he deems himself, he got a losing hand. I look at it this way. Who in the Saints front office is going to say, Mickey, we got to get this deal done. When you look at what's happening here with all these quarterback deals and what's happened with Andrew Luck, let's get it done. And you know what? With the TV money that's going to come in, the salary cap's going to be increased. Let's roll it a little bit here. Go in a 4-year contract, and let's roll this out. The only guy that can do that today is Dennis Lauscha, who's the president, basically president of the Saints, financially. I don't think Tom Benson's going to be the one to tell Mickey, get the deal done. I think it's going to be Dennis. So I'm hoping in the next couple weeks that situation comes to a head, because I'm just telling you now, it's going to cost you less today than it will February of 2017.
I'd agree with you there. Mike Detillier has been our guest. We've kept you for a while, Mike. Great analysis. I have 2 more questions for you that some listeners requested. 2 players at the collegiate level that you know a lot about, that you've covered, that you've talked to. One of them right here for the Raging Cajuns, Elijah McGuire. The other one in Baton Rouge, Leonard Fournette. Sprained his ankle today. He's in a boot. They expect him to be fine by the time they play Wisconsin. Where do you see these guys at the next level? In the draft, I mean, we expect Fournette to be a first-rounder. How high? And then McGuire, what kind of round are you looking at? Break down these 2 great talents, and then we'll let you run. We really appreciate the time.
I work with 5 former NFL quarterbacks during the season, so I put up with a lot of grief. They say quarterbacks trump every position come draft day. And you know what? I think they're right, and not think. I know they're right. I think Leonard will end up being a top 5 pick. I do think the Cowboys picking Ezekiel Elliott, I think, will help. And certainly Todd Gurley was the 10th pick. Now, a healthy Gurley might have went even earlier than that. But when I look at it come draft time, the quarterbacks always overshadow it. He'll be my top-rated player, but he won't be the top pick. I think Deshaun Watson will end up having that position. And then you got 2 quarterbacks right behind him, in Chad Kelly from Ole Miss, Brad Kaya from Miami of Florida. Guys have shown a lot of potential as NFL quarterbacks. And, man, that guy at Texas A&M is pretty good coming off the edge.
Not too bad.
Man, he's something special. So I think I just named you the top 5. Where Leonard falls there, I would think probably would be either in the 4 or the 5 spot. I think, Myles Garrett will come into play there, and he could potentially be 4 and Leonard 5. But I do think Fournette's in the top 5. He's the best offensive football player I have scouted at LSU in 30 years.
Wow. That's high praise coming from you, Mike.
And it's not a debatable issue. I mean, it ain't real close. There is nothing on the football field he can't do. If he was a linebacker, he'd be the best linebacker at LSU. If he was a wide receiver, he'd be the best wide receiver there. Super smart, very intelligent, instinctive, the ability to run with power and speed, and a well-grounded young man. He understands. He's handled pressure like this since he was 14 years old. So it's not new to him. He understands it. And I've always been impressed with him off the field as much as on the field, how he's handled fame extremely well. And if LSU gets to the national championship game, it'll be on the back of Leonard Fournette. Scott, I'll tell you this, and I got a bet with somebody going on now, but I bet LSU runs the football, carries-wise, more this year than they did a year ago. I think Les Miles is emboldened now with the fact that, you know what, I got another shot, I'm going to do what I do best. And if I had Fournette and Darius Geis in the backfield, what the hell do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to put the ball in Brandon Harris's hands? Now, what I need Brandon to do is to play big on 3rd down and in late October and November. I need for him to make some plays for me in the passing game. But I think LSU's not going to change philosophy. They're going to do exactly what they've done under Les, and that's being a run-oriented team. But Leonard is the best offensive football player I've seen at LSU in 30 years. Elijah McGuire, he's Louisiana's version of Reggie Bush. Really good edge rush runner, catches the ball well coming out the backfield, can return, punts, kicks, whatever. I think, he's undersized, but real shifty, very very sharp with his cuts, speedy, and he's physically gotten much bigger. He's put on some weight since coming from Vanderbilt Catholic, and I remember telling James over 3 years ago when UL signed him that you have got a star, not a good player, a star player. He's one of the best players on the Bayou I've seen in the last 25 years. I mean, he tilted the field, how good he was, and he's done that at UL. I mean, he's one heck of a football player. You're probably looking at a third, fourth-round pick in Elijah, somewhere in that range, just because running backs are devalued in the NFL. And so he's going to slide into that position. But all these, drills in the off season, he'll excel at. And I knew how he grew up, and I knew how tough it was for him to get to where he was. And he's a quality young man, and I think he'll have a fantastic senior season for the Raging Cajun.
There you go, Mike Detillier. He reminds me, his game, a little bit of Bernard Scott with the Bengals. Now that he's put on some more weight, particularly the upper portion of his body, he's added some power, but very shifty, and we're all excited to cover him as he enters the senior season. We're always excited to talk to you guys. Mike Detillier, he is as good as it gets in the business, folks. Head to MikeDetillier.com. You can learn more about, first of all, his draft report he comes out with each year. I call it the Draft Bible. It's as good as it gets when you break it down. You want to know details on every single player. And then the Where's Mike portion of his website, you can find out where to hear him weekly, whether it be on the Sports Note with Billy Rickman here, Saturdays with Mr. Bitter, Mondays on WWL. Of course, doing stuff with Eagle 98.1 and Charlie Hannegriff and some stuff, obviously, at WWL. He writes columns. He does it all, folks. Mike Detillier. Give him a follow on Twitter, at Mike Detillier. Mike, you've been so generous with your time. Always appreciate it, my friend. Continued success, and thanks for all the breakdown today.
Thanks so much, Scott. I appreciate it, buddy.
You got it.